Rocket blitz Lviv rocked by cruise missile blasts as Putin opens chilling new war frontier in West Ukraine near NATO border. 3 Russian missiles exploded in Ukraine's largest western city less than a day after Putin vowed to focus on the east. At least 5 people were injured after the blasts in Lviv, which is just 45 miles from NATO member Poland's border. Thick black smoke was seen rising from a TV tower as the city's air raid sirens were activated. TV towers across Ukraine's other cities have also been a target of missile strikes throughout the war. It is the first time Putin's military might has been seen from the center of the city, which has been a safer destination in the country for refugees. Lviv's mayor Andriy Sadovyai said a fuel storage facility is on fire as a result of the shelling. He urged everyone to stay in shelters. Humiliated tyrant Putin yesterday vowed his troops would focus on liberating pro-Russian separatists in the eastern Donbass region. But advisor to Ukraine's Ministry of Defense Markian Lubkivsky said he was skeptical over the claims. It comes after President Zelensky said 16,000 Russian troops have been killed so far in Ukraine as his soldiers fight to retake the first city that Putin seized. The Ukrainian leader, 44, said his troops had delivered powerful blows to Moscow's forces around Kiev and urged the Kremlin to negotiate an end to the bloody war. But he vowed he would never let any Ukrainian territory be handed over to tyrant Putin, 69. Mr. Zelensky also warned that Russia's bragging about its nuclear power is fueling a dangerous arms race. It came as advisor to Ukraine's Ministry of Defense Markian Lubkivsky predicted troops could take back southern port city Kherson today. Mr. Lubkivsky said, "I believe that today the city will be fully under the control of Ukrainian armed forces. We have finished in the last 2 days the operation in the Kiev region, so other armed forces are now focused on the southern part trying to get free Kherson and some other Ukrainian cities." Kherson, at the mouth of the Dnieper River, fell earlier this month in Russia's first major gain of the war. But a U.S. defense official said Russian control in the strategic city appeared to be waning as Ukrainian troops fight back. The official said, "We would argue that Kherson is actually contested territory again. We can't corroborate exactly who is in control of Kherson, but the point is, it doesn't appear to be as solidly in Russian control as it was before." They added that if Ukraine did regain control, Russian troops around Mykolaiv would end up sandwiched between defense forces. The official said, that would make it very, very difficult for them to make any kind of ground movement on Odessa. That would be a significant development, no question about that, in terms of the southern part of the war. Ukraine is also said to be close to major victories in the battle for Kiev as British defense officials said there was now a realistic possibility that the towns of Bucha and Irpin would be encircled by Ukrainian forces. The Ministry of Defense said Russian troops are facing considerable supply and morale issues, and it was unlikely they would be able to regroup and take the capital.
That Poland is taking on a significant responsibility that I don't think should just be Poland's, it should be the whole world, all of NATO's responsibility. The fact that you have so many Ukrainians seeking refuge in this country of Poland. We understand that because we have in our southern border thousands of people a day, literally, not figuratively, trying to get into the United States. But we believe that we, the United States, should do our part relative to Ukraine as well by opening our borders to another 100,000 people. We take Article 5 as a sacred commitment, not a throwaway, a sacred commitment that relates to every member of NATO. One of the things that I thanked the President for downstairs was the fact that the single most important criteria in this time of a changing world, so much is changing, not just here but in other parts of the world, is that NATO stay absolutely, completely, thoroughly united.
Biden says Putin cannot remain in power in fiery speech on Ukraine war. U.S. President Joe Biden said that Russia's leader Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power in Poland Saturday, remarks a White House official said later were meant to prepare the world's democracies for extended conflict over Ukraine, not back regime change in Russia. Biden's comments on Saturday, including a statement earlier in the day calling Putin a butcher, were a sharp escalation of the U.S. approach to Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine. In a major address delivered at Warsaw's Royal Castle, Biden evoked Poland's for decades behind the Iron Curtain in an effort to build a case that the world's democracies must urgently confront an autocratic Russia as a threat to global security and freedom. But a remark at the end of the speech raised the specter of an escalation by Washington, which has avoided direct military involvement in Ukraine, and has specifically said it does not back regime change. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power, Biden told a crowd in Warsaw after condemning Putin's month-long war in Ukraine. A White House official said Biden's remarks did not represent a shift in Washington's policy. The president's point was that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbors or the region, the official said. He was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change. Asked about Biden's comment, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told Reuters, "That's not for Biden to decide. The president of Russia is elected by Russians." Calling the fight against Putin a new battle for freedom, Biden said Putin's desire for absolute power was a strategic failure for Russia and a direct challenge to a European peace that has largely prevailed since World War II. "The West is now stronger, more united than it has ever been," Biden said. "This battle will not be won in days or months either. We need to steel ourselves for the long fight ahead." The speech came after 3 days of meetings in Europe with the G7, European Council and NATO allies, and took place roughly at the same time as rockets rained down on the western Ukrainian city of Lviv, just 60 kilometers, 40 miles, from the Polish border. Their brave resistance is part of a larger fight for essential democratic principles that unite all free people, Biden said. "We stand with you. Period." In his speech, Biden said NATO is a defensive security alliance, it never sought Russia's demise, and he reiterated that the West has no desire to harm Russia's people even as its sanctions threaten to cripple their economy. Poland was under communist rule for 4 decades until 1989 and was a member of the Moscow-led Warsaw Pact Security Alliance. It is now part of the European Union and NATO. The rise of right-wing populism in Poland in recent years has put it in conflict with the EU and Washington, but fears of Russia pressing beyond its borders has drawn Poland closer to its Western allies. Speaking to a crowd holding US, Polish and Ukrainian flags, Biden said the West is acting in unison because of the gravity of the threat to global peace. The battle for democracy could not conclude and did not conclude with the end of the Cold War, Biden said. Over the last 30 years the forces of autocracy have revived all across the globe. Reaction was mixed in Warsaw. Mykita Hubo, a Ukrainian from Dnipro who has been living in Poland for several years, called the speech ordinary, lots of talk, little action, he said. Paweł Sterninski, who traveled nearly 3 hours to Warsaw from elsewhere in Poland to hear Biden, came wrapped in a US flag. The US can't really engage militarily because that could result in a third world war. Putin is unpredictable. If you're threatening with nuclear weapons, it takes just a moment to turn into a global conflict. Earlier in the day, Biden dropped in on a meeting with Ukraine's foreign and defense ministers and made additional, unspecified security pledges on developing defense cooperation, according to Ukraine's foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba. In Warsaw, Biden also visited a refugee reception center at the National Stadium. More than 2 million people have fled the war to Poland. Altogether, about 3.8 million have left Ukraine since fighting began. Putin calls Russia's military actions in Ukraine a special military operation to demilitarize and denazify the country.